The phone buzzed at 7:14 the morning. I was still in my robe, standing at the kitchen window with my coffee, watching the first light come over the backyard. I had built that backyard, laid the stone path myself, 20 years ago, when my knees still allowed it. I used to think about that whenever things got hard. Hands in the dirt. Something real. I looked at the screen. It was my daughter-in-law. He let it ring, not because I was angry. Not yet. I just had a feeling. The kind you develop after 63 years of living, after building a business from nothing, after raising a son who never once had to wonder whether the lights would stay on. A feeling like standing at the edge of something and knowing, before you even look down, that it is a long way to fall. I set the mug on the counter and called her back. She picked up on the first ring. The mortgage payment didn't go through, she said. No good morning. No hello. Just that. I paused for a moment. Which mortgage? I asked, though I already knew. The house, Gerald. The one you said you would handle. I had never said that. Not once. Not in any conversation I could recall. Had I ever agreed to pay the mortgage on the house my son and his wife lived in? The house I had bought? Yes. Bought outright. With money I had earned over 4 decades of work. But pay their monthly expenses on top of that? No. That was not something I had ever agreed to. I never said that, I told her. She exhaled, the way she always did when she thought I was being difficult. Gerald, we talked about this. We had not talked about this. But I had learned, over the 3 years since my son married her, that her version of a conversation and my version of a conversation were rarely the same. She had a gift for retrofitting agreements, for filling in silences after the fact with whatever she needed them to say. I'll call my son, I said. He's busy. I'm sure he can take a minute for his father. She hung up. I stood there in the kitchen for a long moment. The coffee had gone lukewarm. Outside, a bird landed on the stone path and pecked at something invisible in the grass. I watched it for a while. Then I went upstairs to get dressed, because I had a feeling this was going to be a day that required being fully clothed. Let me go back, because none of this makes sense without the beginning. I grew up in rural Ohio, the youngest of 4 boys, in a house where my father worked double shifts at a plant that eventually closed anyway. We were not poor in the way that breaks people, but we were close enough to it that I knew exactly what it felt like to want something and understand clearly that wanting was not enough. You had to work. You had to plan. You had to make decisions at 20 that your future self would be grateful for, even if your present self resented them. I moved to Columbus at 22 with a truck, a toolbox, and about $800. I got into contracting. Small jobs at first. Drywall, flooring, bathroom remodels, then bigger ones. By the time I was 35, I had my own company. By 45, I had 40 employees and contracts with commercial developers across 3 states. I am not telling you this to brag. I am telling you this because it matters to what comes later. Because the money I had was not inherited. It was not lucky. It was mine in the most literal sense of the word exchanged. Dollar by dollar. For years of my life. My wife Carol passed when my son was 16. Pancreatic cancer. She was here, and then she was gone. And the world rearranged itself around that absence in a way I am still, even now, adjusting to. My son was her boy, through and through her eyes, her stubborn streak, her habit of laughing at the wrong moments. After she died, I will admit that I overcompensated. I gave him things I should not have given him, said yes when I should have said no, smoothed out difficulties that he should have been allowed to struggle through. I know that now. I knew it, in some quiet corner of my mind, even then. But grief does strange things to your judgment, and I told myself I was giving him the stability I never had. By the time he was 25, my son had never held a job for more than 8 months. He had a college degree, courtesy of my checkbook, that he had not once used. He drove a car I had bought him, lived in an apartment I paid for, and called me reliably whenever he needed something, and almost never otherwise. I told myself it was a phase. I told myself he would find his footing. I told myself a lot of things. Then he met her. He was 28 when they started dating. She came from money, or at least she presented herself that way. Good clothes, a confident manner, opinions about restaurants and travel that suggested she had done a great deal of both. Her family was from the Atlanta area. Her father, from what my son told me, had done well in commercial real estate. I never met her parents in 3 years. Not once. There was always a reason. Within a year of them dating, the financial requests had doubled. The apartment was too small. Could I help with a down payment on something? His car needed replacing. Could I cover the difference? She wanted to take a trip to Portugal. Could I transfer something to help them enjoy it? I want to be fair here. My son had always asked me for money. But there was a different quality to the requests after she arrived. A precision. A sense of pre-planning, like someone had looked at the available resource me and developed a strategy. I said yes more than I should have. I said yes because he was my son and I loved him and I missed his mother and he had her eyes. I said yes probably 6 or 7 times when I should have said no, and each time I said yes, I told myself it would be the last time. It was not the last time. 2 years ago, I bought them a house. I want you to sit with that for a moment. I bought them a house. Not co-signed on a loan. Not contributed to a down payment. Bought. 4 bedrooms, finished basement, good neighborhood outside Columbus. I paid $387,000 in cash because I did not want them carrying debt, because I thought, perhaps foolishly, that stability of that kind might be the thing that finally made my son stand up straight. That if he did not have rent or a mortgage hanging over him, he might find the space to figure out who he was. What happened instead was that the requests continued. Different line items, same pattern. They needed furniture. They needed a new roof sooner than expected, apparently. She wanted to remodel the kitchen. Could I help with the car payment? Just this month. While they got back on their feet. Back on their feet implied they had been on their feet at some point, which I was beginning to doubt. I kept a ledger. Not because I planned to do anything with it. Just because I am the kind of man who keeps records. By the time that morning arrived, the morning she called about the mortgage I had never agreed to pay, I had given them, in documented transfers and purchases, a little over $340,000 in 3 years, not counting the house. $340,000. My son had, in that same period, worked briefly at a gym, briefly at a friend's landscaping company, and not at all for the last 14 months. That morning, after I got dressed, I called my son. It went to voicemail. I called again. Voicemail. I sent a text that said simply, "Call me when you can." I did not hear back until nearly 4 in the afternoon, at which point he called and opened with, "Dad, she's really stressed about the mortgage thing." "She's stressed," I said. "Yeah. We thought you had it set up automatically." "I did not have it set up automatically. I do not pay your mortgage, son. I bought you a house. I don't recall agreeing to also pay the carrying costs on a house I gave you." Silence on the line. "We've just been going through a lot," he said. "Tell me what you've been going through," I said. I meant it genuinely. I wanted to understand. What followed was a 15-minute account of stress without specifics, of difficulty without details. She was dealing with some things. He was figuring out his next move professionally. The timing wasn't great for them right now. Could I just cover this month, and they would handle it going forward? I asked him what his plan was for handling it going forward, given that neither of them appeared to be employed. He told me I was being harsh. I told him I loved him, and I would call him tomorrow. I did not sleep much that night. I lay in the dark in the house where I had raised him. And I thought about Carol, about what she would have said, about whether I had failed in some fundamental way that I was only now fully reckoning with. I thought about my father working double shifts. I thought about $800 and a truck and a toolbox. I thought about $340,000. Around 2 in the morning I got up, went to my office, and opened the ledger. I looked at it for a long time. Then I picked up my phone and called my attorney, a man named Richard, who had handled my business affairs for 21 years, and who I trusted completely. I left him a voicemail at 2 in the morning because I did not want to lose the clarity I had in that moment. The specific quality of seeing something plainly after a long time of choosing not to. I told him I needed to talk. I told him it was about the house. Richard called me back at 8 the next morning. I laid out the situation. He listened without interrupting, which is one of the things I appreciate most about him. "What do you want to do?" he asked when I finished. "I want to understand my options," I said. He walked me through them. The house was mine. I had never transferred the deed. In the press of everything, in the generosity of the moment when I had bought it, I had intended to transfer it to my son, but the paperwork had been delayed and then forgotten, and it had simply never happened. Richard told me that was significant. I asked him what the process would look like if I needed to reclaim occupancy. He told me. I thanked him and hung up. I want to be clear that I did not make any decisions that morning. I am not a rash man. I had built a company by thinking carefully, by not reacting from emotion, by looking at situations from multiple angles before committing to a direction. What I did was gather information. I sat with it. I went for a long walk through the neighborhood, past the stone path I had laid with my own hands, and I thought, what clarified things in the end was not the money. It was something that happened 4 days later. I had a checkup with my cardiologist routine. Nothing serious, but the kind of appointment that makes you take stock regardless. Afterward, I called my son to tell him I had been to the doctor, that everything was fine, just wanted him to know. He did not answer. I called twice more over the next 2 days. I sent 2 texts. In 72 hours, I received one reply which said, "Good. Glad you're okay, Dad. Hey, did you have a chance to think about the mortgage situation?" That was the sentence that did it. Not the $340,000. Not the 3 years. Not even the Portuguese vacation. That one sentence. The economy of it. The efficiency with which he had converted my health into a transition to a request for money. I read it sitting in my truck in the parking lot of a grocery store, and I felt something shift in me, quietly and completely, the way a door sometimes closes in a house, not slamming, just a soft click, and then the latch catches, and it is shut. I called Richard again. I told him to begin the process. What followed over the next several weeks was methodical and, on my end, quiet. Richard drafted the appropriate notices. I had them delivered by certified mail. I did not call ahead. I did not warn them. My son called me approximately 45 minutes after the notice arrived, and the conversation was loud on his end and calm on mine. "You can't do this," he said. "That's our house. The deed is in my name," I said. "You bought it for us." "I bought it, yes. I never transferred it." "That is a distinction that matters. This is because of the mortgage thing, isn't it? This is her fault. She's going to lose her mind." "This is not about the mortgage," I said. "It is about 3 years of a pattern. It is about a text message I received on Tuesday that told me everything I needed to know about where I fall in your list of priorities." He told me I was being unbelievable. I told him I loved him. He told me I had a way of saying I loved him that felt like a door closing. I thought that was perceptive, actually. I told him so. He hung up. She called me 40 minutes later, and that conversation was different. She did not yell. She was very composed, very precise, and she said several things that were clearly designed to make me feel guilty about what Carol would have thought, about what kind of man leaves his son without a home, about how I was going to regret this. I let her finish. Then I said, "I have never been asked once, in 3 years, how I am doing. Not by you. Occasionally by my son, but usually in the context of leading to something else. I have been a financial instrument. I would like to be a father instead. That is what this is about." She was quiet for a moment. Then she asked if there was any possibility I would reconsider. "No," I said. "Gerald." "No," I said again gently, because I meant it gently. "This is not anger. This is a decision." She hung up. The notice period was 60 days. They spent the first 30 days, from what I could piece together, trying to find another arrangement and not finding one. My son reached out 3 more times. I responded to each message, briefly, with warmth but without movement. He asked once if I would at least sit down with them. I said I was open to that, but that it would not change the outcome, and he should not expect that it would. He declined. My brother, who lives in Denver and who has known me for 61 years, called me in the middle of all this to tell me he had heard what was happening through my son, who had apparently called him, hoping he would intervene. Are you doing okay? My brother asked. Honestly, I said, I feel more like myself than I have in about 3 years. He laughed. That sounds about right, he said. Carol would have said something a long time ago. I know, I said. She always had better timing than me. On the last day of the notice period, I drove out to the house. Not to confront them, they had already arranged to be elsewhere, which I suspected was deliberate and which was fine with me. I had a locksmith meet me there. I walked through the rooms while he changed the locks, just walked slowly from one to the next, looking at what they had done with the space. They had done well with it, actually. The furniture was good. The kitchen, which I had paid to remodel, looked beautiful. I stood in the kitchen for a while looking at the countertops and the light coming through the windows, and I thought about how a place can be lovely and a situation can still be wrong. I picked up the mail that had accumulated by the front door. Mostly theirs. One envelope addressed to me, which I found odd. I opened it. Right there, in the entryway. It was a card, no return address. Inside, in handwriting I did not recognize, it said, "You were always the only adult in the room. I hope you know that. I do not know who sent it. I have thought about it many times, and I genuinely do not know." I stood there in the entryway of the house I had built a life of work to be able to buy, holding that card, and I felt something that took me a moment to name. It was relief. My son and I did not speak for about 6 weeks after they moved out. Then, on a Sunday morning, he called. He was staying with a friend, he said. He had gotten a job, a real one, at a project management firm, entry-level but full-time. He had been there 3 weeks. Okay, I said. I'm not calling to ask for anything, he said. I just wanted you to know. I'm glad you called, I said. And I was. The conversation was short. Careful, on both sides. The way conversations are when two people are rebuilding something, and both of them know it, and neither wants to move too fast. Before we hung up, he said, I think I owe you a lot more than money. You don't owe me anything, I said. Just keep showing up to work. He laughed. It sounded like Carol. I am not telling you this story because I think I did everything right. I did not do everything right. I said yes. For 3 years when I should have said no. And a better version of me, a braver version, an earlier version would have had this conversation with my son when he was 25, instead of waiting until I was sitting in a parking lot reading a text message at 63 and feeling like a stranger to myself. What I am telling you is that there is a difference between love and funding. That the most loving thing I ever did for my son was not the house, not the car, not the $340,000. It was the 60-day notice. It was the locked door. It was the phone call I did not soften or retract. My father worked double shifts in a plant that closed. He never gave me a house or a car or a bridge loan between my dreams and reality. What he gave me was the understanding that the world does not owe you a soft landing. That understanding built everything I have. It is the most valuable thing I own. And it is the one thing, for all those years, I forgot to pass on. I am not forgetting anymore.